All right, today we're going to talk about our discussion-based assessment. It's that time again, so this is exciting, I'm sure, for all of you. If you came to the first one, and I'm sure you did, everybody did, well, nearly everybody, you know that one of two things happened. Either you came and you were prepared and you knew all about the three artists that we had studied before, and this took you very few minutes because you were able to tell me in just a few sentences exactly what I wanted to hear and able to demonstrate that you paid attention to the review or to the lessons in class and knew enough about the artist to quickly and easily get an A on your DBA. Or you came to your discussion based assessment and realized you did not know what you needed to know. And I ask you to go back, look at the review, and come back and demonstrate your understanding. In either event, you know that you're going to get an A on your DBA either the first time or the second time, or if you have to, the third time. But it's going to be painless and easy, particularly if you pay attention and take some notes during the discussion based assessment. So let's take a look at our artist. This week, we're going to be taking our DBA and talking about Henri Matisse, Andy Warhol, and Andy Goldsworthy. So to start off, we're going to talk about Henri Matisse. Matisse was a French painter born in December 1869. Grew up in a wealthy family, studied to become a lawyer. He became very ill, and we talked about how a lot of artists and kind of got to start this way. They became ill, became bedridden, and were given art supplies to buy their time, and then developed a love for art and painting and so forth, which he did. Throughout his career, excuse me, he was involved in the Fauvist movement, and he grew up old as he grew older and became ill, and even more determined to create art. He created new ways to make art, particularly these awesome collages that we talked about. Passed away in 1954. The Fauvism art movement began in the 20th century when a group of artists, including Henri Matisse and Andre Derain, began using bright colors in very unexpected ways. And on the right are a couple of examples of these Fauvist paintings. And we see these bright, beautiful uses of color, these big, bold, painterly brush strokes being used. They were not going for realism. They were going for this bright impression they could create, this sort of excitement created by the color itself. For example, you can see the pink mountains layered behind the houses in the background of Matisse's landscape and in the foreground of Derain's cityscape. Oranges complement the blue boats here. In the bottom right, you can kind of see, and we've talked about those color combinations using those contrasting colors, those complementary colors, blues and oranges, yellows and purples, that sort of thing. Fauvist colors were emphasized by the use of painterly brushstrokes. The artwork is painterly in the viewer, as in the viewer can easily see the brushstrokes. They're not, very soft and subtle. These are bold and kind of in your face. Looking specifically at how Matisse and the Fauvists used color, again, we talk about those primary and secondary colors, lots of yellows, blues, oranges, the purples, the greens. When we did our make day, we looked at creating a painting of perhaps one of your um, uh, own pets or an animal in your home, and some of those were absolutely fantastic. Y'all did some great work. But we see again those very flat use of color, which not trying to create the form. He's fine with creating shape. We see very bright use of color. Color's not representational. Those trees in the bottom left hand painting aren't green like trees would be. They're bold purples and blues and that sort of thing. In his later years, Matisse, like many other people, developed health problems. Um, it's how you deal with those problems that matters most. And so Henri Matisse responded by creating a brand new type of artwork for himself. He began to get rid of the paint brushes and the pastels that he'd used previously, and traded those for scissors and paper. He was able to cut these large shapes out. He began to paint with these large pieces of color, paper and fabric and that sort of thing. And just like in the paintings that we saw, he used a lot of pattern in his paintings. He also used a lot of pattern very often in some of these collages as well. Matisse realized he wanted to make large scale cutouts and he had to work with an assistant. He always said you should never hesitate to ask for help when it comes to making art. When we look at those collages, again, we see the use of that pattern repeated and repetition, I should say. Those repeated stars, the repeated little leaf shapes. Um, and we also see that simplification of the shape. We don't see a lot of form trying to be implied. Lots of very flat color, if you will. And it's sort of a continuation of what he was doing in paint, only now doing it in these collages, this cut paper. So, what should you have on your note sheet so that you'll do well on the DBA? Know his name, of course, but he's a French painter. Know that he painted late 1800s through mid 1900s, essentially, father of Fauvism. Be able to describe Fauvism a little bit, talk about the bright use of colors, um, those very simplified shapes, the brush strokes, and so forth. Worked the collage later in his career. And again, how Matisse used those elements is very similar to what you could say about Fauvism. Those use of primary and secondary colors, broad painterly brushstrokes, simple organic shapes, flat use of color, and use of pattern. Next up is Andy Warhol. Andy was born in Pittsburgh in 1928. He was again ill, stuck in bed where he could draw, listen to radio, and read comics, cut pictures out for magazine. And he too, from a young age, was inspired by being sort of bedridden and ill, and that's what sort of sparked his life as an artist. In his career, he was an illustrator, and that's kind of how a lot of artists get started. He um, was an artist who created images for companies, specifically for the shoe company. He was also later hired to do album covers and posters. By the 1950s, he was being recognized not just by the galleries in and around New York, but really nationwide and even globally. By the 60s, he was it. He was the big thing in art. He was known big for collaborations and so forth. And we talk a little bit about the factory he created. But he was most known for being a prominent artist, pop movement artist, excuse me. Pop artists tried to make artwork that anyone could understand. Where Andy Warhol had that commercial background, he really fit in perfectly with this genre of art. It was for people who could understand those images and feel a recognized attachment to those images that they were already again familiar with. Pop artists often included text, symbols, popular people, and even products in their artwork. What really makes pop art pop are the elements of art and principles of design. And so when we look at what are those, again, the use of color, and it's one of the reasons we kind of compare Matisse and Warhol is the big bold use of those primary, secondary colors, both created and used repetition and pattern. May have been leaves for Matisse. We see lots of geometric shapes for Andy Warhol. He would create an image, then repeat that image over and over again and create his own repetition and pattern. These are Andy Warhol works again that look at how the pop artist focused on very simple use of the elements and principles of art. In the bottom left are those soup cans. Andy was known for using um, popular culture imagery, things that were already well known. Campbell's soup is a very popular, well known brand. People are used to seeing it. It's very recognizable. It's an icon. And so it brings back memories for people by simply using that. It sort of inspires a certain understanding of what's going on in the art. But he's also used those elements of repetition to create the pattern that we see created by the soup cans, by the image of Mao Tse at the top there, the Mickey Mouse there on the bottom right, the animals. I mean, excuse me, in the bottom middle, the animals on the bottom right. All of those squares being repeated, those soup cans being repeated, create that pattern that was again sort of similar and reminiscent of what Matisse had done. And he was big for using those screen printing, that screen printing technique. Very often he would come up with the idea and have assistants or aides create the work using the screen printing. And we talked a little bit about that process. And on the left is one of those images that sort of look at that process of screen printing. But we looked and talked briefly about the factory, the huge gallery and studio that he opened, where he created art, but also people came to make art with Andy, to simply be inspired, to create music, and that sort of thing. On the right, there's an image of he and Jean-Michel Basquiat. They were two of the most famous collaborators when it comes to art collaboration during that period. What should you have on your note sheet? Well, something like this. You should know that he was prominent in the mid to late 1900s. He was a major artist in the pop movement. Pop art focused on what was popular at that time. Many of you all did some great make day projects where you focused on what's popular during this time, and that's the idea. He did a great job. His art focused on celebrities, name brands, familiar images. He often used screen printing, lots of bright colors, simple shapes, created a pattern by repeating his images. And you should know about his collaborations with Jean-Michel Basquiat. Last but not least is Andy Goldsworthy, and Andy Goldsworthy's a grand departure from the two other artists. Andy Goldsworthy's very different, where they focus on bright colors and paintings and pop art and things that were popular. Andy Goldsworthy focused on nature. He's a sculptor born in Cheshire, England in 1956. He recognized for creating large, site specific artworks. In other words, they had to be sort of created in the area in which they were going to occupy. Using natural materials like sand, ice, stone, and wood, Goldsworthy believed his love for nature began at an early age when his parents encouraged him to work on a farm. Aside from his many works in England and Scotland, Goldsworthy also created site specific artworks in North Pole, Japan, the Australian outback, and the United States. This is an image of Andy working in that natural environment with that natural media that he used. Using natural materials like twigs, pebbles, and ice to create an artwork requires an artist to be focused, patient, and work slowly. Some of you all recognize that when you created some of your pieces on the Make Day. Some of them were very reminiscent of what we see here. If you turned in one of his actual images, I probably put a zero and ask you to create your own, most of which you all did. And we want to be inspired by not by Andy Goldsworthy, not claiming his work. Unlike other artists, Goldsworthy doesn't use any artificial materials, no string, no glue, no tape. Everything he puts together, he attaches with natural things. He focuses often on using these organic things, these things you find in nature, to create sort of controlled geometric shapes, maybe controlled shapes. Sort of taking that natural, combining it with that unnatural, if you will. Sometimes artists are also environmentalists. This means that the artist cares deeply about nature and the earth. When an artist is also an environmentalist, they often choose to arrange organic materials in a way that draws attention to the natural beauty of the environment, which encourages viewers to appreciate the nature surrounding them. And again, this is one of those pieces that sort of remind me of those things we have here in Kentucky, those big foundries, those forges that you can see here and around. If you get out into the Daniel Boone National Forest, there's all kinds of them in there. Um, but when we think about Andy Goldsworthy, some of the things I want you to focus on that I want you to have written down and understand most. First of all, I want you to know when he worked again, similar time frame as Warhol during the mid late 1900s. He worked exclusively with natural media. If I ask you anything about Andy Goldsworth, the first thing you need to say is he only used natural things, only things that grew in and around in nature, absolutely nothing else. He often created his artwork in that space surrounded by the nature where it was actually going to happen. If you remember, he would arrange colored leaves and then put them in a creek and let them float down the creek, and that would become his artwork. He often made geometric shapes and forms from organic media. Again, we talk about how he made those circles, those squares, those triangles, pyramids, cubes, those types of things from natural organic things. Artists like Andy are often referred to as environmental naturalists. They combine that idea of using nature to be an ambassador for nature, if you will, and using his art to bring attention to the beauty and importance of nature. All right, that's your DBA review. You're going to come this week. The reminder of times. Monday, Tuesday this week, you can come between 10:30 and noon because seventh and eighth grade are also testing this week. You can come between um, 9 a.m. and noon on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week. All right, last but not least, you still need an attendance question answer, and let me pull it up now. I can't. I guess I could have them both open at the same time. That'd make it a little easier, but. And we are recycling one of my favorites because, well, oh, where did it go? Oh, there it is. Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema. We are recycling Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema today because I am getting ready to work on a new Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema painting. Um, and this is the one that I've done now. If you remember, oh, oh, there we go. That's Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema. If you remember, I've got that painting of the woman with the roses, and I'm getting ready to do another one of his. I really like his paintings, though. But Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema, Dutch painter. He was born in Dronrip. That's a tough one. Netherlands, trained at the Royal Academy of Antwerp. But he does these really cool paintings of people from I believe he painted in the 1600s, painted people from the 12 and 1300s, and he would create these period pieces that looked really neat. Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema is your prove that you came to the class today attendance question answer. Guys, have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you on the Make Day.